Hydrogen will have an important role to play in reaching net zero carbon emissions by the middle of the century. What is the extent of this role, and how will hydrogen redefine international energy partnerships? How are traditional energy exporting nations reacting to these developments? Does hydrogen have the potential to enable greater energy independence or balance in energy trade? Or will it exacerbate already existing structures of dependency?
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We have had a very insightful and very intensive day, and we now want to do our final session on day one of BETD 2022 on this very crucial topic of whether hydrogen can reset global energy relations. And clearly, green hydrogen does offer multiple opportunities to those countries and regions that are in a position to harness it, whether as producers or as importers. Yet questions remain, and we discussed this earlier today when we heard from the heads of the International Energy Agency and IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, about hydrogen's efficiency and scalability. Far-sighted infrastructure and R&D investment will be needed to bring this, one must say, much hyped technology to fruition. And hydrogen will also, and we heard it just now in that short film, reset the global geopolitics of energy. Governments and international organizations have a unique opportunity to proactively shape this new market in a manner that could maximize benefits and minimize risks. And we want to talk about how that can be done, about the foreign policy implications of a global H2 market and what priorities should be guiding the new hydrogen diplomacy, as well as where international cooperation is most important, both to mitigate risks and maximize opportunities. We have a great panel with us to address all of those issues, and I'm going to keep the introduction short in the interests of time, and we'll also be very grateful to our speakers if you could please keep your responses to the questions concise so that we can hopefully manage to be interactive and cover as much material as possible. So when I say short, I mean about 3 minutes per person. In our original round, and then 2 minutes after that. It is now my pleasure to introduce, starting at that side of the panel, Christina Averbeck. She is executive member of the board of directors of the Climate Alliance Germany, which is a civil society coalition with over 140 member organizations. Welcome to you. Also with us, and very pleased to have her here, is Gauri Singh. She is with us virtually. She's Deputy Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency. I mentioned it just a moment ago. She's had a long career in renewable energy and sustainable development, amongst other initiatives, leading the National Solar Mission India 2010. Great that you can be with us. Also with us is Omar Paganini. He is Minister of Industry, Energy and Mining for Uruguay. He brings private sector and academic experience to his current post. Great to have you with us as well, joining us remotely. Diego Meso Puello is Minister of Mines and Energy for Colombia and previously served at the IMF and also worked as senior economist at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Great to have you on board. We are waiting on Tom Alweendo. He is Minister of Energy and Mines for Namibia and former governor of the Bank of Namibia, and we're told he's signing a contract at this very moment, which sounds important and hopefully useful. So we are expecting him to join us imminently. Sri Alok Kumar is State Secretary in the Ministry of Power of India and has had a long career in public service in a variety of sectors. Thank you so much for being with us here on the panel. And finally, seated directly next to me, it's a pleasure to welcome Neda Gonji. She is Minister of Industry and Renewable Energy for Tunisia. And she will be speaking French, ladies and gentlemen, so if you would like a translation, you do have a headset available here in the room. And I'd like to start with a question to all of the ministers and policy makers on the panel. All of your countries aspire to becoming hydrogen exporters in the near future. And I'd like to ask you how this will factor into your foreign policy and strategy, and how you expect it to influence your relations with other countries. And we will begin with Minister Gonji, please.
Bonsoir, merci à tous. Un plaisir de me retrouver dans ce panel pour parler d'un thème d'une grande actualité aujourd'hui, à savoir l'hydrogène vert. Nous sommes
I'm sorry, I can't hear anything.
Aujourd'hui
I'm sorry.
À une vitesse croissante. On parlait il y a quelque temps d'énergie renouvelable, de solaire, d'éolien.
Un moment, s'il vous plaît. I guess there's no translation yet, is that right? Okay, I'm told we're working on it. The technical team, do you need another minute or two? Okay, we will move on and come back. Excusez-moi, on revient.
D'accord.
So I will go on to Minister Meza Puyo, if I may.
Thank you. I think for Colombia, the clean hydrogen economy has a significant opportunity both from a foreign relationship and also from an energy perspective. Currently, I have to start by saying that Colombia has one of the longest stable democracies in South America. We believe firmly on multilateralism. We believe that energy security shouldn't be an issue, and we are ready to help Europe and other parts of the world that are now, struggling to balance out climate action plans and energy security. And I said this because Colombia today is a net energy exporter. We mostly export fossil fuels at the moment, but we have everything in place to become one of the largest exporters of green hydrogen. We have world-class resources in wind, in solar, in water. We've developed a very robust policy framework over the last 3.5 years with fiscal incentives for the production of green hydrogen. And we also have the infrastructure in place to be able to produce initially for our domestic market, because we already consume significant amounts of hydrogen, and we need to replace gray hydrogen with green hydrogen, but in the medium term to be able to export. So we're pretty much ready, and we are happy to say that we can combine this opportunity from a security point of view for energy security, but also from an economic point of view. And this is a topic that brings together both our diplomacy and our energy capacity, and we're ready to deploy it to contribute to energy security around the world.
And what do you think will change?
So I think the world now is realizing that energy partnerships have to be strike with countries that share your same democratic values. Given what's going on in the invasion in Ukraine by Russia, which we actually condemn in the strongest form possible because we think is unprovoked, is illegal, is brutal, that's going to be the main decision factor now going forward. I think you would like to depend on allies that share your same democratic values, that respect the rule of law, that respect democracy, and that's going to be a key factor going forward for Europe, but for the world as a whole.
Thanks very much, and we'll take a deeper dive on that in a moment. Let me say hello to the Minister of Mines and Energy of Namibia, Tom Alwenda. Wonderful that you can join us. And we're just beginning, so you haven't missed too much. We're talking right now about how hydrogen could reset countries' foreign policy, reset their energy relations and diplomacy. And we've just heard from the Costa Rican minister, and I will go now to the Tunisian minister because our translation is available. Madame Gonji, please.
Okay. Merci. Donc, je disais qu'aujourd'hui, les pays comme la Tunisie qui ont engagé des programmes ambitieux de politique.
Yes, Tunisia has a few very ambitious programs to develop renewable energies based on solar and wind. We are now in the process of switching to this new system of transforming our system. So we would like to rely heavily on green hydrogen because of the potential it has to offer in Tunisia. We're talking about desalination of seawater, solar energy, and thus we can produce green hydrogen. We're working on a pilot project to move towards the production of green ammonia, because we do have a large phosphate processing industry, fertilizer industry, and we'd like to produce green fertilizer. Our foreign policies are in line with this strategy. We cooperate with our European partners. There's a program that unites European countries, Mediterranean countries. With Germany, by the way, we have an additional program, an accompanying program of studies and pilot projects. And thus we intend to work out a plan for the production of green hydrogen. The ties we have between Tunisia and Italy for the transport of gas, these will be used for other purposes. We want to be able to transport hydrogen. We're pursuing active policies and diplomatic relations because we intend to cooperate with European partners in order to make all this happen.
To that key question also about the transformability of existing infrastructure for gas into purposing for hydrogen. Let me go now to Minister Alwendo, if I may, with the same question, to talk, if you would please, about how you see the advent of hydrogen. Your country also has ambitions to become a hydrogen exporter. How you see that as changing your country's international energy relations?
Thank you very much, and my apologies to come a bit late. In fact, while I was late, it's because I was conducting green hydrogen diplomacy, so that's why I took a bit longer to come here. Namibia, we are one of those lucky countries where we have got really world-class renewable resource. You can talk about the wind, you can talk about the solar. We're really, I think, on where we are geographically located as a country, we have got great resources. And that will then also put us in a position where we can actually be one of the front runners in the creation of green hydrogen assets. Such that last year, we went out to the market, we issued an RFP to identify companies that want to collaborate with us in producing these assets. At COP last year in Glasgow, we announced the preferred bidder for this RFP, and we are now busy with the company called Hyphen. Hyphen, it's actually, some of you might know Hyphen. It's the people we are working together to actually produce this asset. And that really put on a very, very good position. But for that also to work, the energy diplomacy, the collaboration that we need to have partners to work with us. Because the green hydrogen or the ammonia that's going to be produced, it'll be much, much more than what we need as a country. It will be much, much more than what the region needs, for example. And therefore, we need to find markets where we need to actually export this product. So far, we've been talking to the EU, We've been talking to the governments like the German governments. We have signed an MOU with the German governments. We have signed an MOU with the Belgian government. We have also signed an MOU with the Port of Rotterdam. So we have got those kind of collaboration to make sure we quickly transform word into actions, like the theme of this event, to say let's transform the word into actions. And I think once you have got all these partners together, it's going to be much, much easier then for you actually to transform words into action. And we really look forward to have this collaboration going forward.
And collaboration is something we're also going to take a deeper dive on a little bit later. Let me go over now to our minister from Uruguay, Mr. Paganini, and ask you to also address the same issue of where you see this resetting your country's international energy relationships.
Well, hello to the audience, especially to Diego, who I know, who we met last year. As you know, Uruguay has a renewable energy policy already for 12 years. We have transformed our electricity matrix. 97% of our electricity now is from renewable sources. We have good wind and sun, and we have a good combination of wind and sun that has allowed us to do this. And we have a lot of land and water so that we can go forward and move strongly into hydrogen. To do that, we have been carrying out some studies and are ready to announce the roadmap together with consulting firms such as McKinsey. And tomorrow, specifically, we are announcing the first pilot project in hydrogen in Uruguay. Of course, the same as many of our countries that are seated in this panel, our local needs of electricity, being a small country with 3.5 million people, are reduced. So we have to think about exports as a natural way to carry out the hydrogen initiatives. And of course, that means not only to export hydrogen, but maybe to start in the export of derivatives such as methanol or green kerosene or whatever. That is our roadmap, and we are announcing it very shortly. And of course, this fits very well into our national policy of decarbonizing, but also it fits with our international policy of opening and diversifying our markets. Maybe you're not aware, but Uruguay is a food producer and a forestry and cellulose producer, and more our main customer is China. Historically, however, we have been with very strong ties with the European Union and with the US and in the West. So I think hydrogen, and we believe strongly that hydrogen is a way to strengthen our ties with the West, with the democracies, with the culture legacy we have. And so we have been working together with the Port of Rotterdam, together with the German government, to make possible this hydrogen transition. We are looking forward to take part in the initiatives the German government is putting forward, such as H2 Global, and presenting private projects in Uruguay to supply to hydrogen derivatives to the German market. Mm-hmm. There is no doubt that for the hydrogen economy to take place, there has to be a strong partnership with countries demanding hydrogen and its derivatives, and countries that can produce it and have a surplus of it. So we visualize a process in which Europe especially and South America can strengthen their ties in these partnerships, where the technology comes maybe from the European companies, and the demand comes from the European market and also maybe other markets such as Japan. And our countries that are rich in renewable resources and have, in the case of Uruguay, a long time experience in changing our matrix to generate green electricity, can move forward and transform it into an export new commodity.
Thank you, Minister. And we'll pick up on the theme of cooperation again a little bit later. Let me just go to State Secretary Kumar now, please. Also, a brief word for how India sees it.
Thank you very much. So, India has moved very fast on energy transition, and we have made, I think, very good progress, very significant progress in our national determined contributions, both in terms of the growth of renewable energy as well as energy efficiency. See, now in the COP, our Honorable Prime Minister has announced another goal, that is net zero by 2070. So we are preparing a now grand and long-term strategy to do this energy transition. And hydrogen is figuring as a very major initiative, which has a very big potential. We also realize that the development of hydrogen as a cost-effective substitute to non-fossil fuels, both coal and gas, can't be done by any country single-handedly. It needs a lot of international collaboration. And talking of our foreign policy orientation, India has been very, forward-looking. We have launched 2 initiatives to mention the International Solar Alliance, and our Prime Minister has also given the call for One Sun, One World, One Grid. So we see that hydrogen will provide another big window to collaborate with the international community, which will enable India also to develop hydrogen as a low-cost solution. And we will also be benefited by international collaboration and partnership in terms of trade, R&D, technology. We have already done quite a lot of work. We have set up a dedicated task force with US. Very recently, we have launched a clean energy partnership with Japan. And we have also included the green hydrogen as one of the key pillars in our ongoing partnership with Australia. And very shortly, we are very keen to do it with Germany also. Let me just mention last thing, that India has very significant strengths in terms of the very richly endowed areas for solar and wind. And we have a very robust national grid, which can connect very effectively all the production areas and consumption centers and the export centers. So India sees that hydrogen is a very big opportunity for very effective international collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like now to go to our two non-policymakers on the panel, starting with Christiana Averbeck, and then go over to Gauri Singh to talk a little bit, put into perspective what we have been hearing, because clearly there are very high hopes on in a large number of countries, by no means confined to this group that we have with us here, in terms of where hydrogen will take them and also their own ability to become hydrogen exporters. And in fact, IRENA, which Gauri Singh does represent, has pointed out in its latest study that the buildup of a global hydrogen economy will fundamentally redefine the international energy landscape and the geopolitics of energy. So I'd like to ask the two of you, how do you see the geopolitics of hydrogen differing from those of a fossil fuel-based system? Where do you see the most disruptive changes and challenges? And will the system that emerges be more stable? So Christiana, please.
Actually, that's what I'm hoping for. I mean, that's what we are asked for many years, that we have to get out of fossil fuels as soon as possible. And I'm quite excited that all these ministers here show that they are on the right track, I would say, at least that they go into green hydrogen. And some of the countries were into fossil fuels for many, many years. And we saw the destructive signs of fossil fuels. And therefore, no, I think this is a good development that we are some years down the line are now pushing for green hydrogen. And we have to focus on green hydrogen. I would like to emphasize that. And that means that coming to the opportunities, I think that it means that there will be a diversification. Different countries will have the opportunity to produce green hydrogen. I don't know. Different countries will have the opportunity to produce green hydrogen. The Minister of Namibia already told us how the potentials are. But what we have to make sure is that sustainability criteria are considered, so that we are not running into other risks that we don't want at the moment. We don't want that we have conflicts about water use, land grabbing. We fear that corruption could come in place. We fear that human rights are not considered. We fear as civil society organization that it's a deal between governments, but that the local people in the area that are affected, where you establish the power plants, the renewable power plants, are not considered, and that energy poverty, it should not contribute, but it should assist your countries who, I've lived for quite some time also in Southern Africa. I know that energy poverty is still big topic. So you have to make sure that also your people have the opportunity and access to energy. So that the energy is not the green hydrogen is not only exported to a country like Germany, but that you make use of this new source.
Thanks very much. And let me go over to Gauri Singh. And that study that I mentioned by Irina points out a number of disruptive changes and challenges that could changes that could boost hydrogen's potential as a system stabilizer, but challenges that could reduce that potential. So can you just briefly take us through some of those?
Thanks, Melinda, and thank you for having me on the panel. You're absolutely right. We are at some level the same place where we were with solar a decade back, and where there were countries that were very aggressively going forward with their targets. We have currently almost 30 countries that are looking at strategies to be either importers or exporters of green hydrogen. And what it's also doing is it's unlocking areas of high potential of renewable energy, which were otherwise not really which were not really being employed. So in a sense, it's giving that opportunity of converting the technical potential of renewable energy into the actual potential by moving into green hydrogen. But clearly, while we do see that, there will be many more countries which will enter into a bilateral relationship to start with. But what we also see is that there would be more of a trend of regionalization of the energy trade, which is very different from what we see right now. There will be an element of continuity because we also see some of the the current energy producers, whether they're in the Middle East or Australia or other countries, who are also trying to pivot into blue and green hydrogen. And it'll really determine how fast they are able to pivot and make it a mainstay will be extremely important thing to watch. But as a nascent sector, it's extremely important that the government continues to support it with a very clear policy framework and give this a long-term visibility of the market, of the demand, because that's when investments will be able to come in. And I think that's going to be a critical challenge.
Thank you very much. And I want to get to those 2 points in just a moment. Let's do a very quick audience poll at this juncture. We have the following question for the audience to vote on. And again, I think you know by now how to vote. And in fact, many of you appear to already have voted. But let me give you a chance to keep on voting. I'm not sure whether everybody's weighed in. The question is, an abundance of which resource will be most decisive in building up a competitive hydrogen export economy? And this really gets at two things. It gets at some of the confusion that's out there in between green hydrogen and other forms of hydrogen. And it also gets at this question of what are the fundamental prerequisites for countries to become very competitive in this area, because we see so many contenders. In many ways, this session is almost like a pitch, where each of you is laying out your big plans. And so the question will be, who is likely to move ahead in this friendly competition? So I'm going to let the audience keep on voting and essentially come to that question. And Minister Alwe Endo, Namibia obviously has excellent geographic conditions for the production of green hydrogen. You also talked about the abundance of renewables, but the same can be said for neighboring countries that also have big aspirations. So what differentiates you from others? What would you say are the crucial preconditions that need to be met?
A lot of things differentiate. As I said, not only the existence of the resource itself, but also the policy that has to buttress those resources. It's one thing to have the resource. How do you actually get it out? How do you produce it? Maybe before I even go there, my neighbor says, let's make sure that when we do this, we don't make it worse for some people. And I think that's where the issue of a just transition comes in. You don't want to make a situation worse whereby now suddenly we have got all these green hydrogen sites going all over and then actually displacing some people or making some people, some community worse off. So that's a very important point to be made to say the producing countries, the people in the producing country must made to feel that actually they got something to benefit from it and therefore they embrace what needs to be done. But as I said now, in Namibia, not only do you have the resource, but what system do you have? How are you going to make sure that the green hydrogen that you are going to produce is really green hydrogen? Who's going to define what it is? Is it going to be the producing country only, or is it going to be the consuming country if it's now you're exporting? Probably both. Not only the producing, but also the consuming the market. You need to start to have global standards that are understood by everybody to say, if you want to say you are as a country exporting green hydrogen, that's what it is. Namibia, as it says, we are neighboring with South Africa, for example. We do not want to be competitors with our neighbors, nor do we want to be competitors with countries far away like Colombia. My friend Diego here said, look, we're not competitors. We actually need to be collaborators. This is a huge interest that actually are starting. It's not something that can be satisfied by one country or by one region. And because of that also, likely is that it will be different from the fossil fuel, from the oil, for example, because you had few countries, having oil. But suddenly you have got regions, you've got various countries, and therefore the future of that industry will probably really be different. But as I say, once we are now starting all doing this, we do not need to be competitors at all. We actually need to be collaborators to learn from each other and how to make sure that the industry actually become a very stable industry where all of us can participate in that industry.
Again, I want to ask all of the ministers to weigh in on these points. I'm looking at the clock, though. We have a big panel and not a lot of time. So if you would be so kind as to keep your answers pretty short, we can hopefully get in a couple more rounds of discussion. Madame Gorgie, I wanted to actually ask you the same question. And Minister Albuendo told us one of the things that will distinguish producers is the degree to which they have essentially policy frameworks that ensure transparency, that ensure that certain standards are followed. Would you agree with that assessment? And if so, what is Tunisia doing in that area?
Absolutely, absolutely. Aujourd'hui, effectivement, je considère qu'un nouveau monde est en train d'être reconstitué. Nous sortons d'une énergie fossile vers des énergies vertes, vers des énergies...
We are phasing out fossil fuels and moving towards green energy sources. They are closer to our citizens.
Industriel et économique. Et je pense...
I'm telling you that against the backdrop of a new industry, a new economy that is developing, we need to work on this. We need to make sure that everyone cooperates and coordinates. Of course, some may have a competitive advantage as opposed to others, but we need to talk about what the options are for collaborating in terms of renewable energies and also green hydrogen, not only at regional level, but also international level. We also need to look at the legal framework.
Les relations entre les différents pays.
Of course, another aspect we want to address, or need to address, is how we can improve relations between countries. At the level of our government, we are working on a regulatory framework to open the market in the best way possible. We want to make sure that our European partners are able, also including other partners, but mainly Germany, Italy, and France, to cooperate with us, especially with the MENA region also. We want to create a cooperation that is as open as possible. We also want to create the best possible benefits of this new economy, this new industry. I already addressed the existing gas pipeline we want to use. I also want to draw your attention to the fact that we are cooperating and want to cooperate with European countries in order to assess how we can use this existing pipeline for hydrogen. So, regarding our strategic approach, we are facing a new era. And we want to make sure that we can use existing infrastructure. This also applies to power lines and the like for solar energy and hydropower and the like, and wind power. This opens up a new chapter.
Pick up on repurposing, hopefully a little bit later. But let me go now to Latin America with Ministers Meza and Paganini and ask you about to tie up the regional with the international, because both of you, I think, mentioned regional uses. And at the moment, Latin America is using hydrogen mainly as a feedstock for refineries and for the chemical industry. So talk to us a little bit about how you see the region transitioning to low-carbon production of hydrogen and what preconditions need to be met for Latin America to play a leading role in an international H2 market. Please.
Sure. Thank you, Melinda. And I think both Omar and Tom mentioned something that is a challenge but a significant opportunity, not only for Latin American countries that have potential, but also in Africa, as we heard before. And is that the potential capacity to produce clean energy and therefore clean or green hydrogen exceeds by a long shot what we can consume internally. So yes, we need to start by replacing the consumption of gray or hydrogen in our countries, which is small, but very quickly we have to position ourselves to be able to become net exporters of green hydrogen. So I think, to begin with, those industrial uses is going to help us become more competitive. We're already doing that in Colombia. 2 weeks ago, we put into operation the first 2 green hydrogen projects in our country, one in the refinery, as you said, and the second one, which we see as an intermediate step, is to blend green hydrogen with natural gas for the distribution network. And that's, a new use that is going to help us expand. But in the end, what we need to do is be able to export either green hydrogen in its pure form or as derivative, as we've been talking about, so ammonia, methanol, jet fuel, and other uses. So, but the great advantage here for us is that our capacity far exceeds the demand that we have locally.
Thanks so much. Minister Paganini?
Well, Diego has been very clear in this. Just to fill in a little bit more details, Uruguay still uses 40% of its energy from fossil fuels. All the fossil is imported. We don't have local oil and gas. And hydrogen is very marginal here as a byproduct of the refining process. So all the growth of the electricity generation we will build from now on will be completely renewable, as has been for 12 years. And the use for hydrogen is clearly for green hydrogen. No other option is available for us. Also, the development of green hydrogen facilities in Uruguay and chemical plants to produce methanol, for example, has to be far away from the capital city. So that's very good for us from a decentralization of development point of view. Uruguay does not have energy poverty in a strict sense. 99.6% of our population is connected to the public grid. Fortunately, we are a small country with a simple geography. So I think in the national level, we have a local use very clearly aimed at transportation and some industrial usage, but this will be small and will not be available alone. It has to be joined with exports, as I said before. In the regional point of view, I think Latin America has a much more renewable sources than its local demand, and it has to together move into a global producer of green hydrogen and its derivatives in a road that will take some time. It needs international cooperation. It needs to define standards, security, ruling and regulation the worldwide way, and partnering with the demand in developed countries. So this will take some time. It will take logistics development, but it has to be a cooperative endeavor of the whole world, we think.
Thank you very much. And State Secretary Kumar, we've heard a lot of discussion today about energy independence and energy security. And I saw that Prime Minister Modi has said that hydrogen could help lead India to make a quantum leap to energy independence by 2047. So are national security concerns a key driver for you when it comes to hydrogen?
Thank you once again. Let me say, hydrogen mission, we have launched a very ambitious national green hydrogen mission. It meets two key objectives. One is our energy security, making India energy independent by 2047, and also completing our goal of energy transition. So we import a lot of coking coal for our steel, import a lot of gas. So idea is that we initiate this mission in the sectors where it is easy to initiate, like refinery, the fertilizers, and some city gas. And India has very successful model of sharply reducing costs through scaling up. I'll give you two examples. See, we have done this in LED lighting, both in households and the street lights, and same for the solar PV. The costs have come down. So India is aiming to implement the same model of rapidly scaling up by building up obligations in refining the fertilizers and city gas, and working very closely with international community to develop and further refine the technology, the standards and R&D. And in that process, we see the export of green hydrogen is an important element of our strategy to scale up the demand and production to sharply reduce costs. Once you are able to do this, maybe in the next 5-6 years, then India will be ready to implement those achievements in the hard-to-abate sectors like transport and steel. So that is our vision, that the hydrogen will fulfill both objectives, the energy transition as well as energy independence, and to begin with scaling up and then to implement them in the hard-to-abate sectors and transport. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me go to Christiane Averbeck to talk a little bit about the hydrogen application or use picture here in Germany. You have said that hydrogen should only be used in applications where there's no alternative. And Germany sees hydrogen as particularly important for hard to decarbonize, hard to abate sectors, for example, like energy, like industry and energy. Would you agree with that? And if so, do you think that the German strategy is on the right track to get there?
Actually, I would say the national hydrogen strategy is a little bit outdated. It was developed 2 years ago, and you can see that after 2 years, things have changed dramatically. I mean, not only through the war in Ukraine. Gas is no more a bridge. I mean, that's fossil gas. And therefore, we have to consider all these new developments. We see that hydrogen is very scarce right now. We've unfortunately, in the last legislation, not done enough in investing in renewable energies. Now we are a bit late, I would say, and unfortunately now the government now has really to speed up in such a dramatic way that it means that when using hydrogen, and I mean green hydrogen, we should focus on green hydrogen, we should focus on using it only in certain sectors. And I agree with what was said in the IRENA presentation, that we should concentrate on the chemistry sector, we should in the steel industry, in how do you call it, in ships, and but not in heating and not in individual traffic. I mean, that's or mobility. I think that's what is missing in the strategy, and I think they have to work on it again and have to actually develop a new strategy, and I think the government is also working on that. At least that's what I'm hoping for.
Thank you very much. Let me go back to Gauri Singh now, and I'd like to talk about money. Hydrogen does remain costly when it is produced with renewable energy, and development of infrastructure so far has been slow. And of course, this is also where the repurposing issue comes into it. But which investment considerations along the hydrogen value chain will be most likely to influence the future market? Where do policymakers and investors really need to be watching how the money flows in order to shape a market that is truly efficient and optimizes the potential?
So I think, Melinda, what's going to be very critical is putting money for spurring innovation and also putting money into R&D, because this is again a very nascent sector where a lot of work needs to be done on technologies and getting them customized to the conditions that countries will be operating them in. But apart from that, I think a very serious issue will be access to low cost of funds, which basically means that apart from what policymakers need to think about creating the markets as what was pointed out by Mr. Alok Kumar about creating obligations and creating the market that will attract private investment in. But also because this is a new sector, so banks are not going to be really forthcoming to fund these. So there will need to be investments and the policy signals from government to make sure that there is mechanisms to do some kind of risk mitigation and create the enabling framework for investments from private sector to come in.
Thank you very much. And just want to go very briefly back to Christiana Averbeck, because I want to start talking about cooperation. And just a brief question to you, essentially, for that external perspective. All of our speakers have emphasized that this has to be a collaborative approach. It has to involve cooperation. Certainly that would distinguish development of a hydrogen economy from what we saw at the inception of the fossil fuel industry, where it was often a race to the bottom, wasn't it? It was often not about standards. It was not about consideration of local populations and so on. Do you think countries are going to walk the talk when it comes to cooperation?
Actually, I hope they do, because I think that I'm sure that also the world has changed. I mean, also through the Paris Agreement, we are realizing that we are sitting in one boat. And my hope is that everybody is realizing that going into green hydrogen is also a wonderful opportunity to develop a new world of cooperation and considering and respecting the needs and requirements that all the different countries have in the world, and especially also the challenges that all the countries have. I mean, when it comes to water security, for example, or the availability of land.
Thank you very much. So let's do one last round where each of you, and I'll start again with the ministers, tells us what you think are the most important cooperative endeavors. You know, maybe it's funding, maybe it's standards and norms, but whatever it is, your priority, and then also, second part, whether you think that the new geopolitics of an international hydrogen economy will be more stable than the energy system that we have now. So I'll start with Minister Alwayendo, please.
Thanks, Melinda. I think this new industry has got a better chance for countries to cooperate. You know why I'm saying that? Is because this is no longer just a commodity. It's no longer just a country producing something. We are doing this because we want to carbonize the climate. You want to do something. There's an end to it. And therefore, whether you are a producing country or you are a consuming country, you are doing something because you need to address this climate change. And therefore, that in itself, I think, should really enthuse some better collaboration than I think the other energy we have. Yes, you're going to have to need the market. The question about funding is very, very important. How competitive is going to be? Who is going to provide that capital? But then again, if there is a market, there will always be money to be found. As long as there's a market, there will always be. And therefore, let's also start really earnestly addressing the issue of the markets. The hard to abate, industry. How committed are they also then to start shifting to green hydrogen? That's where you need to start. And therefore, once you do that, obviously there's a market, and therefore the capital is going to follow. But I also do agree, any new industry, obviously there will always be hesitance in terms of how to invest in that. And therefore, countries need to have policy that has got some incentives built into that so that at least you actually attract capital. The multinational or the DFIs, Development Financial Institutions, need to get involved. How do they actually make sure that actually long sustainable funding, in the pipeline for that to happen? So funding, yes, and the market, those are the things to do that. But I'm sure, or I'm actually hopeful that there will be much more cohesion in terms of how the countries are going to cooperate, because this is not just producing energy and selling it, but rather we need to address the climate change.
Thank you so much. Madame Gangi?
Moi, je pense effectivement les problèmes que connaît le monde aujourd'hui.
I believe the problems that the international community is facing are additional problems. They come on top of the climate problem we have. And this is what the Paris conference showed quite clearly, and COP26 showed that. We are facing a new era, and that is true for all countries. So international cooperation needs to be one of the main challenges we need to tackle right now at the national level and at the international level. Compliance with standards and regulations, we need to follow words with actions. And we need to be more cooperative at the international level. Finances must be made available for current and future political strategies, so we can put our plans into action. As far as the market is concerned, I believe the markets do exist. They are there for renewable energies and for green hydrogen. So when you look at the situation as it is today and you think of the crisis in Ukraine, I do believe there is a market for green hydrogen, but the conditions must be right. They must be well thought through and analyzed, so that at international level, a good and regular cooperation is possible.
Yes, I do think that financing is key. I think the demand for green hydrogen is there. I think the supply is there, but we need to make sure that we level that, because if you look at the prices that the demand is willing to offer, is not going to match what the supply requires for these projects to close financially. So I think there's a significant effort that has to be done to massively fund green hydrogen projects in the short term to get the market going. One example that H2 Global in Germany is doing is putting 900 million euros to close that financing gap, but that's not enough. That's for 10 years for 3 different applications. So we're talking about 10 million, 30 million per year, which is not enough. We need maybe 100 times that. And once we are able to produce this competitively, then we can think about having a market operating normally. And then the second point on cooperation, I think it's absolutely key. We've seen it here with Africa, with North Africa, with Latin America. What I said before, that we have excess potential capacity in renewables, it's also going to be matched with that Europe in particular, and some countries in Asia, are not able to produce enough clean energy that they demand. So I think we have the right forces in place. We just need to make sure that we close the gap from a financial point of view to begin with.
Thank you very much. Minister Paganini?
Well, very shortly, of course, we think green hydrogen is really needed to the difficult decarbonization processes, the part that is not easy to decarbonize just with renewable electricity. And so it's imperative to go forward with this. I think the world is showing that we should go forward quicker. Of course, I agree with Diego that the main challenge here is to help the market to build. Market building, I would call it. And that is a financial thing where supply and demand have to have the long-term stability to long-term investments take place. And that means off-takers have to be guaranteed in a way for any project to be built. So that, I think, is the main challenge. And I think the H2 Global example that Diego put is a right way to go, but it should be much wider in different ways. Once the market gets going, I think there is the demand and the supply in different parts of the world. Of course, also collaboration is needed for standards, for new technology, for the new developments, and that will take place. But once the market starts working, things go forward. I think it will be a more stable future regarding energy if green hydrogen takes place, because it will be a more diversified world with different regions of the world being suppliers and other regions being buyers. And this is not what we have now. So this geopolitically is much more stable. And also it's, I would rather emphasize that we all get together to complete a global goal that is to end with climate change. So in that way, I think we are looking forward to a new future that has to be accelerated.
Thank you very much. And now to Secretary Kumar, please.
Thank you. I feel there are two critical areas where we should focus for international collaboration. First is the demand creation and how to meet with demand, how to meet that demand, Say, competitive procurements in a transparent manner will be the key, because how fast we are able to drive down the cost of hydrogen will depend on its, say, faster adoption across the world for energy transition, because it's an urgency for, if you see the world around, to move away from fossil fuels and also to see that it is more diversified. Second area I feel is the collaboration for R&D and flow of technology in a manner that the manufacturing of electrolyzers and other key supply chain elements are more diversified across the globe. They are not concentrated in one or two countries, because that will create problems for all of us. So these are two things in my mind which are very important for international collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with little time left on the clock, let me first take a quick look at the results of the audience poll, and then I want to get a last word from Christiana and from Gauri. So it more or less stated, we saw it before, clearly the vast majority of the audience at 90% views the availability of renewables as the crucial factor for green hydrogen. With that in mind, let me now go to our two external perspectives, the non-policymakers on the panel. And I think I'll start this time with Gauri, because Gauri Singh, that IRENA report that I've mentioned several times, it clearly views the design of norms and standards as a key collaborative endeavor in bringing green hydrogen to its full potential. So who can drive that? Who is key, central for arriving at the kind of standards that can ensure transparency and truly green hydrogen?
You're absolutely correct, Melinda. And, this is going to be, apart from everything else we've heard from the panelists, this is going to be the critical hinge on which successful development of green hydrogen markets will depend on. And we don't want to see fragmented markets or regulatory competition or trade barriers getting erected. What we want to see is very coherent, transparent rules, regulations, and standards getting put in place. And that will only happen if countries come together, not in a competitive spirit, but in a spirit of collaboration. And I think this is where we would really urge the countries to come together and build these transparent standards for markets to develop.
And I know that Irina didn't take a fully a concrete position on whether a new hydrogen economy will be more stable than the energy system we have now, but it kind of leaned in one direction, didn't it?
Well, in a sense, we think that because of the very diverse set of countries that are coming in, and also the process, which is not really extractive or depending on raw materials, it's much more, it's a manufacturing process. So we do expect that this would be a much more of a diversified energy system that we will see evolving.
Thank you very much. And finally, Christiana Averbeck, you have the last word. Again, your key priority for collaboration going forward and that question about stability.
I would say that all these ministers here have it in their hands also to make it more stable. And therefore, I really would like to encourage you to consider not only your economic interests, but that you really have the possible sustainability criteria in mind and see, I mean, how challenging things can be when you like what we see with the war in Ukraine, when you depend too much on certain energy sources. And maybe this is really a warning, and keep that in your mind when establishing the new system. And please involve your people. Don't think that you on the top level have it all or know it all, but consider those that are on the ground and have to sort of are challenged and by your decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all of you for this very, very interesting exchange about an enormously dynamic future source of energy. Greatly appreciate your being with us, to all of you. Merci beaucoup. And also, of course, to our remote guests. Thank you so much for dialing in. And dear ladies and gentlemen, that brings our panel to an end. And I'm also very, very grateful to our audience. Thank you. Yes, let's give them a warm round of applause.